Hey everybody, so I thought I would go over this REST put activity control. Now, I want to go over for a couple reasons. First of all, if you're looking for this, go to your toolbox, go under communication, and we're going to look at this REST post. Okay, ignore the word post because you can easily do a get. But today, ironically, I'm actually going to use it as a post, and I just renamed it, so it's same thing, tomato, tomato. I do recommend renaming those just so you know what they are. But if you go over and look, and I've got a lot of web pages open, so excuse me for that. But if I go over and look at it, there's not a lot of good information, and I really can't find any examples. So I thought I would help by just doing a video on how to actually do a post and how to push data through my post call through the body. So let's, first of all, when you look through here, there's not a lot of information, and even the information is kind of confusing. For an example, here on this resources, it depends on the request type. So that's mandatory. So okay, is it mandatory? Don't know. Data type, well, that tells me it's a string. Okay, and then over here, how do I use it? Description, well, the description is it depends on the request type. Okay, so well, what if my request type is a post? Then what should go here, right? So there's a lot of these in here that doesn't make sense because of that reason. At least I know that's an in and those are outs, okay? And that's an XML document and that's a string. So that's at least something to go on. But what if I want to recreate, if I go over and look, this is a really good example. And if you ever seen any of my other videos where I'm doing a lot of REST calls, I use these examples all the time. But mostly I use these examples in my get methods, but this time I want to do a post. And we kind of want to mimic what's going on here in this situation. Now this looks like JavaScript because they're doing a fetch, which is a promise, right? And in that fetch, they're hitting these posts and they're doing a post method. And then they're stringifying their bodies they're going to push in there. And then of course I got the headers, and then part of their asynchronism call, when it returns, it's going to return the data, okay? So let's mimic this. Now that I've had that open, I'm going to close it. Hopefully I won't need it again. But what I did was I stuck it in a notepad, okay? So I broke it apart, and what we're looking at is our body, okay? Now notice they have single quotes. Well, that doesn't work, okay? So how do I know? Well, the first step I recommend is use a tool. Now, I use, again, API Strong. It's just an API tool that is really awesome. But the API tool is completely online, and it allows me to test my calls, okay? So here I'm doing a post, okay, which mimics what we said here. And then we need to do the body. Well, if I take this body and I put it in there and I try to run it, just like that, it's a bad body. And I can tell you why. First of all, we have white spaces. We have to get rid of all of our white spaces, okay? And these are stringed objects, so they have to be surrounded by stringed objects, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Move my mouse so I can see. Even the body is stringed. Okay, stringed. Notice those were single quotes when you make them double quotes. And this last one is an integer, I'm assuming, because it's user ID. And I'm going to put something like maybe 8, just an odd number. And notice for some reason they got a comma at the end, so let's get rid of that. And I'm sure that had to do with the way they were doing their code. Don't really care. I'm going to hit send. Oh, and it's still not good. So obviously we're missing something. So I'm going to cheat. Let's see. I'm sure you probably already recognized it, but I was just going to take a quick glance. And let's look at what I did. Okay. So if I'll show you what those are in a few seconds. Well, we'll just go ahead and grab this one anyway. So technically that should have worked. Let's put it on a notepad and see what's going on, because this kind of helps. It's very, very, very important to get that body right, okay? Looks like there might be a space there. There is. Okay, there's a space there. There's your problem. There's a space there. Like I told you, you got to get rid of the white spaces, especially around the colons. There we go. That should be valid. So it's also very important to use something like Notepad that shows you your white spaces, because here that is kind of hard to see. Okay, so now if I send, now it's perfect. So that's all it was our white spaces. Now, as we see, our return is the actual data, which is really good. Now, next step. So let's go ahead and close that. So now we've got a valid JSON that we can use. A trick to that, we'll go ahead and close this one and this one, just keep giving us real estate. I'm going to leave this one open for now. But if I go back over here, and again, I know I'm talking fast, but I've done a really long videos earlier today on how to set up your sandbox. And I really don't want these videos to be just as long. So it's just easier if I go through it. But it is a video that you can, you can watch many, many, many times. So over here in our control, I'm going to mimic the body, right? So that's your body. Okay, your post right here. That mimics the body call that you're going to call. Okay, and then our variable is going to be post, which is here. Now this is a string, so it has to be in quotes, okay? But if you're doing a get, you could just move that to a get, and then you could do a get. Now the hardest thing to figure out was where to get the request content. I thought it would be in resource, because resource can't be blank. But no, it's in request content. So if I go back over here and look, request content, it's mandatory, yes. It's a string, but the information is dependent on request type. Okay, so does that mean a patch is going to look different than a post? And if so, what does it look like? But anyway, so that's how I finally, just playing around, found it. Again, your resources, ironically, I would assume that would be it, because if you look now, I have an error because your resources can't be blank. So, but if you look at this, the help on that, the resource really is like doing a query string. Okay, so. Or it could be like if you have a base URL and you want to split that, right? So it could be like that. Now the other things, once I put my request content, there's a trick to that. It has to be in a string, right? Well, you can't have a string on top of a string. So now you probably could have used escape characters, but I didn't. I just used the double quotes, like I double quoted it. If I make, well, I guess it's quad quoted, if that's even a word, because I used double quotes plus double quotes, which equals 4 quotes, and that worked, okay? This is just old school 1980s VB programming, right? But again, everything is in quotes and everything works. So make sure this is in a quote, right? And the problem is you want to draw the quotes around it. Remember, because it has to look something like this, right? So if I get rid of all the extra quotes, including the outside quotes, just so you can see, including your white spaces. Very important to get rid of your white space. You saw how that looked. Now the white spaces, like in places like this, doesn't matter. What matters is around the colon. That's what JSON looks at. JSON, not Jason, JSON, tomato, tomato, and there we go. So that's what we're trying to build, right? So with building that, we have to make sure that it is surrounded though as string values. Whew, that's a lot of talking. So we're going to close this now. And that is what built this. Now in reality, you would put these in variables down here and you would pass them in. But now speaking of variables, I went ahead and created some. I wanted to get my content type. So if I look at my content type, it's a string. Okay. My error message, I would like to return an error message. If one does come back, it's a string. I'd also like to get the status code, right? And that's, you probably saw me say 201, 201. I just want to double check because I was thinking like 400, 305, but it actually will bring a 201 back. Here it is, 201, which means was successfully inserted as a result. Okay. I kind of just forgot that. And I wanted to show this too. This is a good example of a valid JSON. So you can look it up, right? It has to be in quotes unless the data type is different, right? That's important. So here's a good one. Age is a numeric field, but New York and John are not. I think I definitely wouldn't worry about the array situation because I don't think you can pass arrays. If you can, it'd be fun cleaning it up. But here's your JSON types. I didn't want this video to be about JSON, but you need to understand that in order for this to work. So let me close this. And a quick little Google will give you that. This is the website, the JSON placeholder that I use all the time. They have good stuff up here. Here's the routes. Notice they don't have a link for their posts. So you kind of just have to fiddle around with that. So, but it's a really good thing to use. So let's go ahead and close that. And let's get back to here. And as I was saying before I digressed, I want to return my code, my status, and I'm not really turning anything else, right? I just want to see that it was created. So on here, I'm writing out the status code, right? Status code. Here, I'm writing out the error message. I don't have to make it two string because it is a string. The status code kind of tricked me. It is an integer. Let me show you a trick about figuring that out. If I put a value in there, status code and if you try to cast it to string, your error message should say what it couldn't. So here it says it cannot convert between a string to an integer. So that tells me that value should be an integer, because ironically enough, that is not on the document support. So I didn't know what type that was. And then my response status is the very last thing I want to write out. So I'll shut up. Let's run it. Yes, save and save. And there we go. So it is, as you can tell, it did the post data. My status code was created. The response status says it's complete. My description says it's created. Okay. This is my type, which is JSON, which is what I expect. I did not get an error message back. This was the content, just like you saw. I probably already closed it, but just like you saw when we ran it in API strong, we got this return value. So that's my return content. And now that is just coming back from this itself. So if I wanted to do something with that, like maybe put an if statement, if my status code was not 201, then I can, log it or send an error message. If there was an error message, I can capture it. That's right here. Okay. Again, my status is created and the flowchart is completely done. Okay. So every bit of this right here, you can put in values over here, because that's where I started doing that from, to be honest with you. I saw the return type and I'm like, oh, wait, I can capture this and this information here. So that is how to do a post with the plugin. Ironically, the name of the plugin is post, but it doesn't really work like a post. Now, I'm sorry, it does work like a post. The documentation don't explain it like it's a post. So I do have a video out there where I'm doing an API call to a database, and I plan to do another one for an API call to a CSV file, because that's not out there either. And both of those use the exact same URL, they use the exact same control, but they use the get method. So if you want to see how to do that, it's very straightforward. Please watch those videos. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was helpful, and good luck with your coding.